All right, Elizabeth. So the red light's on, and I'm sure you're like totally freaking out now because it's like, oh my gosh, we're recording.
Oh no, I'm calm.
Oh, calm, all good. Okay, let's do a quick sound check. So I asked this question to everybody. What'd you have for breakfast this morning?
Oh man, actually didn't have breakfast this morning.
What?
Some coffee.
Okay, all right. Anything fancy in that coffee? Just some straight
No,
coffee.
I like my coffee black. I think I
Okay.
grew out of that. I used to like the stupid Big B coffee drinks with all the sugar, which was no coffee whatsoever.
Right.
And then now I drink it just black. I have a European adventure. So
Okay, all right. So yeah, so nothing too fancy this morning, huh? I will say I did not have any breakfast this morning as well. I was hustling and bustling, so I was in and out.
I thought you were giving me shit for that.
Nope, not at all. Nope, I'm right there with you.
Okay.
I did the exact same thing you did. Well, cool. I think we're sounding good. So why don't we just jump in and kind of maybe introduce yourself and talk about what you do to help project creators get patents and stuff. Tell us what you do.
All right, great. Well, my name is Elizabeth Erickson. I am an intellectual property attorney at Quinn IP Law, and just as a little caveat, the opinions expressed in this post are my own and not those of my employer. Just had a little legal disclaimer on there.
Yep.
So what I do as an intellectual property attorney is I have the honor and privilege of working with small companies, startups, and large companies. People come to me with their ideas and they say, I want to do this. And sometimes people don't even know what it is exactly that they want out of the law, but they say, this is my idea. What do I need from you? And then it's my job to take that idea and explain to them, with strategies and tools that can be used in the law to help protect and carve out that right for them and give them the biggest protection possible and allow them to profit from their idea. So I think intellectual property is the coolest type of law out there. I love working with it. I often joke we're like the one lawyer that people want to see because no one's there because they're going through something negative. They're not there. It's not criminal. It's not divorce. People get excited to see me. So it's kind of different.
That's cool. When in like the stage of, let's say I'm a guy, I made something in my garage. I made a widget, when am I starting to seek out, help like what you do? Like when do I come to you? Is it like day one? Is it, you got to come a little bit later? Like when should somebody come to you?
So it depends exactly what you want. If you might be a guy who already has an invention, or you might just want like a business name so you can start creating things under that name. So it kind of depends on what exactly you're looking for. So a short answer to that without getting more specific is the very lawyerly answer of it depends. So if it's an idea that you're talking about, which frequently people will say, I have an invention, it does X, Y, Z. You want it to be in a concrete enough form that I could take it and put it into writing. So you want to be able to have an invention that is solid enough, and then I would walk them through what exactly a criteria for a patent would look like.
And correct me if I'm wrong, is there different sort of stages of like patents, like especially if you're getting ready to maybe do like a Kickstarter or Indiegogo, are you trying at that point to be fully protected all over the globe, or are you getting like a patent pending? Like what are kind of the differences of those types of things?
So there's so many things, and what I would do as an intellectual property attorney is sit down with that person and discuss with them, what's feasible, what monetary constraints do you have, what and as a company too, you want to ask yourself some of these questions beforehand. You'd want to look at your long-term and short-term goals, because if you see yourself selling this product only in the United States for a time, it's not going to be worth your while and worth the amount of expense to have a patent that's expands the entire globe, And even then, even huge companies, I just was at a seminar called the World Trademark Review, and, we had huge companies like Microsoft and Harley Davidson, and they were saying, we have to justify that expense. So a lot of companies operate on a zero balance budget, which means they have zero, and then they have to go to, their boss or whomever and say, this is what we want to do, this is the value of it, and justify that expense to them. They don't usually patent an invention in every single part of the world.
Right.
And sometimes there's reasons why you can't. There might be an invention that already exists in a certain country. So you're not necessarily always able to take your idea or your trademark name or what have you and develop it into a country because it might already have exist. So for trademarks, it's interesting. because certain things might not be allowed because it might be viewed as immoral, or it might be geographically descriptive in a certain region. So there's bars to entry in every single country that vary by location. So like if you wanted to go patent something in the Middle East, the moral rights that something might be viewed as immoral might be different than what is in the United States. So we frequently see things like that. And it's really interesting. And that's why I love what I do so much, because it's just a ever-involving and interesting area of law.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, if I'm the guy that is, again, I made my widget, I'm bringing it to you. How in depth are you getting in terms of like, what is patentable about this? I don't know. I've got like a heated jacket or something like that. Is it like, we've got to take it all the way apart? Are, you're using a little bit of this other product that exists? Like how are you taking this thing on? You're going to own this, right? Like, this is your thing.
Yeah.
Like, how in depth is that?
So technically, I'm not a patent attorney. I do specialize in litigation and trademarks, but I would give it to somebody else who would then look at the specific nature of it. And it depends too. So the first thing that we usually do for any type of intellectual property is we'll do a search to conduct what already exists out there. So just to avoid infringement, we typically recommend that we do a search just to make sure, you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. You'd be barred from getting something that already exists out there.
Right.
So then based on the nature of what already exists, there's ways to carve out a right of yours that's different than what already is out there. And we might make recommendations based on things that are already out there and what you want. Say, this is out there, but if you were to change it in this aspect, then you could have an invention that would be more likely to be eligible to be granted patent protection.
Walk me through, because you said something just a minute ago, the differences about what you do compared to what other people do. Like, just what are the two differences? Or I guess there's probably more than two, but what are the two differences there?
Yeah, so perhaps I should back up even further and just give a broad overview of intellectual property. So, that's terms not exactly taught to you in public schools, and it's becoming an area of increasing importance in today's business and technological world. It's like something like $750 billion annually. So really anybody who doesn't understand what intellectual property is kind of going to be left in the dust. And it's crucial if you're trying to create a business, because the protections you carve out are just essential for a patent portfolio. If you've ever seen Shark Tank, the sharks will always say, "Oh, do you have a patent on that?" And the reason why they ask that is because if you don't, you're now presenting on national television, and who knows, someone can come by and steal it if they think it's a great idea to do. So, IP, or intellectual property, is the non-tangible personal property. They're creations of the mind. It can be inventions, literary and artistic works, images, and designs used in commerce. And so legal protections are given to these inventors to help protect their innovation, to allow them to continue to create and give them the incentive to innovate. And there's different types of IP that have different types of protections. So trademarks, something I specialize in, are the trade names. They're any word, name, symbol, or combination used in commerce to indicate a source of the goods. So, I'm sure you can think of a couple brand names off the top of your head, and it's just the image that you associate with it, the type of quality, that's what you want when you have a trademark. And they could potentially last indefinitely. So if you continue to keep up with your renewals with the United States Patent and Trademark Office or USPTO, a trademark could last forever. Then we have. Oh, did you do a question there?
No, go ahead. I just thought of something, but no, just keep going with it, because I have a question that's coming, but yeah, keep going with it.
Okay, yeah. So we generally say there's four main types. So trademarks are one. Another form is copyright, and that's a form of protection provided to authors of original works in a fixed and any tangible medium of expression, and it can be published or unpublished. So this can be a useful tool for someone without a ton of money, since a copyright is created from the second that it's formed. So if writing like your notes or whatever, it has to be of a sufficient quality and nature. It can't just be like, really short. Like you can't own like, my name is Bob, that's too short. I'm not eligible, but it's technically when you write something, it's created at the moment it's expressed. So that lasts for the life of the author plus 7 years. And it doesn't prevent independent creation of an identical work, which is an interesting thing. So it's not going to be quite as broad as maybe some other things So that's why we get creative with our strategy. But it is definitely a good option for people to have a copyright. And then patents are the big one. Most people want a patent. And this is a right for an invention that permits the owner to exclude others from making, using, offering, sell, importing. So that's usually the big one. And there's a couple different types. There's utility, plant, and design patents. And then the big last one is trade secrets, and that's pretty much what it sounds like. It, hush hush, don't tell anybody.
Grandma's recipe, right? Is that the grandma's recipe?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, recipes are a big one.
Yeah.
Everyone, the big example people like to talk about is Coca-Cola. Nobody
Right.
knows the recipe,
Yeah.
and only 2 people on the planet know the actual ingredients to Coca-Cola. So,
Right.
Trade secrets are essentially free since as long as you're able to keep it a secret. And something as an intellectual property attorney that I would do on my end, if you wanted to have something be protected as a trade secret, is we'd help you put agreements in place in your business and understandings to help formalize the process of trade secrets, keeping things, documents, non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality agreements is another way to say that.
Right.
Just so we make sure if someone does spill the beans, there's recourse against them, right, and to stop the bleeding so you can maintain that cap on your invention.
Wow. Yeah, that's excellent. I was just thinking what popped in my brain, the light bulb went off, was were you familiar with how like Ohio State tried to trademark the Ohio State,
yeah.
right? Like now that one I think fell in they weren't allowed to, right? Because it's so generic. Is that correct?
There's certain things, and University of Michigan was having a good laugh about that because they're always butting heads, and they're sometimes call themselves the University of Michigan. So there's certain things like that if you think of like oat bran or like it describes too much of what the invention already is or what the thing is, so you don't get the right to that.
Right. So I was just recently, I was in DC and I was at the Air and History Museum. And it was interesting because they were talking about how the Wright brothers had like trademark and patented everything on flying, right? Like they owned the word flying, they invented it. So like all the money they made was off of trademarking, the fact that they invented this thing. But at some point that, when I was on the tour, the guy's like, well, this kind of just ran out because it became so broad at some point. But like, is there such a thing that you're looking for? Like maybe right now you own it, but at some point it's just common. It almost becomes like electricity, or it becomes something that's just like in our world now. Like when does that start to happen? And how does that like unravel from it being like, I own flying to like, not anymore? Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
So I get what you're getting at there. So anytime you trademark a word, we call this genericide. It's one of my favorite things to teach because it's a very fun topic. So genericide occurs when a term starts to be used in ways that it's not actually intended to be. So Google is actually at threat for this. So people say, oh, Google that, but they mean, maybe they're on Firefox or Microsoft Explorer or whatever it may be. So when people start using a word to describe everything in a category, then it starts to become at risk for losing its trademark protection. That's one of the ways that a trademark can die, because it can last indefinitely. You forget to renew it, or you could just fail to police your mark. And so policing is another thing that we offer for companies to make sure to monitor the web. If people are posting on blogs or using something in that way, there's tools that can be utilized to make sure maybe education is a way to combat this. So Velcro is another one. Xerox is another one. There's
is Kleenex there now? Like Kleenex have that too?
There's a bunch of examples in this category of things people just say to describe everything. Band-Aid. There's a ton of them. But Velcro has this great video, and I would love to share it afterwards with you so you can have your listeners tune into it, because it's hilarious. It's the lawyers at Velcro, it's actually the attorneys, made this video, and it's really well done. It's a song, actually. They're all singing, and they're not actors. It's actually the guys, and they're talking about how, this is how you use it. Like, this is hook and loop, which is the actual name that Velcro is.
Right.
So please don't call this is Velcro, this is hook and loop, so you can't use these interchangeably, or we're going to lose our trademark. And that's what the genericide refers to, is when people start using it outside of the intended use.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that there was a term for it. But yeah, that's very cool. So let's kind of maybe circle back a little bit to the back to the guy in the garage. Walk me through first step. In terms of even just protecting, maybe not the full thing, but like, is it even like if I just protected like my brand and my logo or something along those, like, or I trademark those things, does that offer me any sort of protection on like, you know, I this name equals what my product will be? Will that protect you at all just to kind of get the ball rolling?
Yeah, so trademarks are going to protect you when people start to try to maybe use your name or your goodwill. Large companies are often at threat of this, so there's a lot of benefits to registering a trademark, and one of them is Custom and Border Patrol, so you can stop counterfeits from coming in. So if other companies that are unregistered or are starting to produce goods that have your logo on them, you can go after them. You can seize the goods. You can freeze their PayPal accounts. You can reach in and get the money that they've unfairly profited by using your name and logo in commerce. And it's also very dangerous for some companies. Maybe they make safety equipment or they make something that is potentially intended for one purpose. And when you're creating a counterfeit good, oftentimes it's inferior quality.
Mm,
So it could be something that's causing harm to people, and then they're now associating
associate with you,
that
right?
that product with that of the brands, and then the brand of course doesn't want that because
Right.
they're producing a goods out of a certain quality and that's not actually one of theirs, so it can be really harmful. Urban Decay, it's a makeup company. They're actually very highly there's a lot of counterfeit goods in the market, which
Mm-hmm.
I find really interesting because makeup isn't one of those things that maybe you pay a ton of attention to. It's probably pretty easy to
Yeah.
copy. So if you start using a product and it's not as good quality, you're like, oh, that brand's terrible, I'm not going to use it again. So that's definitely something that
Was that on Netflix? Was there a Netflix show on this? Because
it's actually so you probably everyone knows about like the war on China and everything, and
yeah.
there's been a lot of news around that, and a lot of that involves around intellectual property theft. There's a ton of intellectual property theft just because of the way that our policies are in the United States that are viewed very differently in China. Copying is actually considered a good thing in China. It's a compliment to say, oh, we liked what you did so much, we're going to do it too. So it's a totally different mindset, but just the United States is trying to get China to view it differently because it's hurting American producers.
Well, that's actually a great jumping off point for my next question, because we've actually had, I think in the course of us doing 10 years of crowdfunding, I think we've had 2 projects basically get ripped off by China, right? So they sent their CAD designs there, and the factory just tweaked it a little bit, and ultimately was selling it on Alibaba before even producing the stuff that the Kickstarter campaign did, right? So they were just undercutting, and truthfully, it comes down to like there was just no call to like we couldn't do anything. There, we don't have enough budget to fight that. What do you do, right? Like you're just
and that's interesting is because it's such an ever-evolving area that today is that just as the counterfeiters are very creative, it has to be creative on the enforcement side as well. So it's like a tri-part network. It's the inventors, it can be law enforcement agencies, and it can be other organizations such as like I could be a part of that trying to combat that. So we're trying to look for creative tools, and it's never usually like a one size fits all response or answer for any individual, because it depends on where it's being sold, what sources they're using, if it's the internet, how do you even look up some of those groups, because you're like, where the heck is this even coming from? So first you got to kind of find who the infringer is, be able to target it down, and if it's like an ambiguous website online, there's tools that you can use to try to find where they're registered, use the web address, and then target that person. You can send them a cease and desist letter, which is a legal notice that, hey, you've been notified that you're ripping off of our product, stop. And then if they don't, you can threaten further legal action if you're so lucky to find the source. And oftentimes companies, they're not usually like it may not be a huge threat, so they would just, want them to stop. But sometimes, and it might be like getting blood from a turnip, they might have such a small operation or small pools, it's not worth it in legal costs to go after them when they're only making, a couple $1,000s or whatever it may be. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot of strategies involved in having a registered trademark or a registered patent allows you to enforce at the border. So you can register your device with U.S. Customs and Borders. So that allows people to, you give them a picture of what your actual drawing is and what to look for fakes. So they might find out for you, so you don't have to do any of the heavy lifting, what if someone's importing a fake good, and you can make them stop and seize it right there. So that's usually a really helpful tool, especially if it's coming from another country.
Yeah, interesting. You know, if the world is continuing to go as global as it already is right now, why does it matter where you might have made it? So let's say I make it here, but my audience is in, I only sell it in, I don't know, Finland, whatever. Like, if this is going to continue to become global, how do we not have like just a global trademark rules as opposed to like US rules? I'm sure it's different in Mexico, Canada, whatever. Like, doesn't it make sense that we would just have a global set of standards to some degree at some point? Or
so there's a couple international agencies that try to streamline the process. And there's the Madrid Protocol, there's WIPO, there's all these regulatory bodies that try to make like a more centralized process to help streamline some of these things. And that's why with some of these, you can register things in more countries at once using a streamlined process. And that instead of going to each country individually, instead of saying, oh, hey, Finland or Mexico, or, what may have be all, you can register like in all European countries at once. And, a lot of countries are signatories to these rules that make it easier for things to be, patented or trademarked in more regions at once. So that's really helpful. This is something that's been raised in the past. In some, most countries are part of this, some countries aren't, which makes it a little bit more of a challenge. But then after it's submitted through these larger bodies, the countries will get them individually to evaluate the, for whatever criteria it may be, to make sure that they are able to register it. And then you'll get registrations back from each country at a staggered timing. So
interesting. How did you get into this? How did your your life trajectory get you to what you're doing right now?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. So before I went to law school, I worked at a lobbying firm, and I worked with tech companies. I worked with like Tesla and Uber and eBay, and I loved seeing people innovating. I loved the tech. I got to the lobbying wasn't for me, but it was really cool to see like Tesla come on the earlier stages. This would have been like 2015, and I got to drive a Tesla, and I just thought it was, just seeing people create and innovate and bringing their ideas, I just thought was like the coolest thing. I loved the tech. I was always kind of like an early adopter of tech, and even I had the newest iPhone for a while, and I'm fascinated by it. I love it, and getting to be a part of that process and help people bring their ideas forward is just something I always wanted to do. And I actually entered law school with that goal, and I'm so happy that I got to carry it on. I was like the president of the Intellectual Property Law Society for a few years, so this has just been a passion of mine. So I consider myself very fortunate to do something that I've dreamed of, really. So
have you ever made anything? Have you designed anything? Do you have
I have a couple ideas of things that I would like to see, but it's not, hasn't come to the table yet, so I'm not going to spoil it here, unfortunately. But
you'll be able to trademark it, right? That's
I have some family members who do stuff like that, and I kind of help them every once in a while. But I don't have any of my own inventions out there yet.
How about for the local listeners, because we do have a pretty good audience size around here, Detroit area. How is the community here in terms of supporting? Are there, like, in terms of resources? I mean, you and I, we met at a at a meetup group, but like, what are you seeing, maybe even through like the law firm, in terms of like support, innovation going on here? Like what's your temperature on our area right now?
Yeah, so I think it's awesome, actually. There's a lot of groups in Detroit, Ann Arbor, East Lansing, and since it is a growing thing, like universities have even started to create like entrepreneurial clubs and meetings that kind of bring together these resources to help entrepreneurs and to help inventors understand what it is they need, to help connect them with resources and funds to get their project off the ground and get them connected with like-minded individuals so they can have a community and place to bounce ideas off of, so they're not alone. And so I really think collecting those types of people from, support communities, if you're in the same boat, legal sources to help get the idea grounded, and then money, because everyone needs to get that off the ground, is crucial. And so many of these areas have recognized that in different degrees, even if it's helping at the educational level or just bringing together those groups. Meetup.com has a bunch, Eventbrite, I'll see things on there. And, I'm a huge supporter of networking. Yeah, I just think going to these events and getting to see faces and talk to different people from different backgrounds, the more you can listen to somebody else's point of view and really understand where they're coming from, I think you can incorporate that into your own and help understand what you need to do next.
Sure.
So you can totally, you just never know where you're going to meet someone that'll help you. So I think that the Detroit area is doing a lot. I think even Detroit itself is starting to blossom, and I think more people are starting to pour money back into the area. So I'm really happy to see all the different groups and everything that's been going on in the area of late.
Yeah, that's very cool. Very cool. How about, without getting into specifics on this next question, but what are like ballpark in terms of like pricing? And I'm sure this could be all over the place, but like what is somebody kind of expecting to sort of spend to at least have some protection? Again, early stage, early in their startup. Is there a sort of at least a goalpost between, or is it all over the place?
Yeah, it really is all over the place. And again, it kind of depends on what you're looking for. So, we'll offer some flat rate pricing. We'll offer some packages. Just kind of, we're willing to work with you and try to see like what's feasible within what your options are and what you want. So I think especially for inventors who don't have maybe all the resources, we've even used people who only have grant money. We're flexible about how the spending is, but just kind of depends. Like obviously, things that are have more protection are going to be more expensive. So a patent is usually the most expensive.
Right.
But even if you wanted to protect something as a trade secret, that would probably be one of the lower ones if we wanted to just talk about structuring of agreements or things of that nature to help you put those protocols in place and measures to help protect your idea. So there's a ton of strategies and tools, just kind of depending on what you want. The pricing varies based on that.
Is it, so like I get a lot of questions of like, how much am I going to spend in marketing? How much am I going to spend in Facebook ads? It's like, $1 million tomorrow? I don't know, but I at least I'm usually like, man, with all the data and everything I've ever seen, I'm always like, yeah, we're probably spending, I don't know, 30% of, for the year. Something, is there even like a percentage that you typically, and like most people are 10% of their budget for the year or 5%, or is there really, even in this scenario, it's not quite like that?
Yeah, it's up to every organization or business depending on what their goals are. But, if you really want a patent, that is an awesome marketing tool. So it allows you to have the exclusive right to allow your business to use and exploit that invention for 20 years from the filing date of the invention. So it gives you a strong market position.
Yeah.
So because their exclusive rights are able to prevent others from commercially using your invention, and thereby you reduce competition and establish yourself in the market as a strong player. And you're also able to get higher returns on investment. So having invested a considerable amount of money and time in developing your product, you could use this as an umbrella of exclusive rights to commercialize your invention, thus enabling you to have higher returns and investments. It's also an opportunity to license. So if you see this as something that you're willing to allow others to also use, you could exploit that patent yourself, or you could sell it and license the rights. So there's different strategies that you could have depending on, how much of your patent you're willing to share with others. It also increases your negotiating power. So if your business is in the process of acquiring the rights to use the patents of another enterprise through a licensing contract, your patent portfolio will enhance your bargaining power.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense.
And it also gives you a positive image. If it's kind of like going back to the Shark Tank example, you explain that puts your level of expertise and specialization of your company out there, so people feel comfortable investing in you. They feel uncomfortable with your knowledge. So it just gives you a whole plethora of rights. So it's really worth investing some of the money and time into these things because you just get that much more return on your investment.
Sure. What about a time frame for what you're talking about? Like, let's say I come to you and I say, I got to get this thing patented. am I looking at?
Well, it's a long process,
Yeah.
so it's better to bring your idea out there early, especially if you see this being a market that might be a quick turnaround. So, the earlier the better. The patenting process varies considerably, and it just kind of depends on what's out there, and it usually takes at least a year, so it's pretty slow. But there's design patents are usually faster. Those can be done in more like months. Maybe that
Mm-hmm.
can be done under a year. So a trademark could be shorter than that too, under a year.
Yeah.
Copyrights can be, those are one of the quicker ones. Trade secrets, you already have them. You
Mm-hmm.
just gotta keep it a secret.
Right.
So just depending on what you need, but patents are usually take the longest to receive a granted right on.
Awesome. How can people like reach out to you? How can they find you if they have questions? They're listening to this and they're like, well, I need to get some stuff done here. How do they reach out to you
Yeah.
and find you?
Yes. So they can email me or they can call my office. So the phone here is 248-380-9300, and I'm extension 140. Or you can reach me at Erickson, so E and then E again, RICKSON at QuinnIPLaw.com.
Cool. Are you comfortable with us putting that in the show notes so people can reach out?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Awesome.
I'd love a shout
Appreciate
out.
it. Awesome. Elizabeth, I thank you so much for taking time out of your day. This was a great conversation. I know I've learned a lot. So hopefully all my listeners out there are learning as well. So again, thanks so much for
Yeah.
your time. I totally appreciate it. It was awesome.
No problem. I appreciate you putting me on the show, Jeff. And if they have any questions or anything like spins off from this, I think there's a lot to really dive into here. I'd be more than happy to come back on the show and answer some more specific questions or follow up in the notes.
Yeah,
So
that'd be great. Awesome. Yeah, I will let you know what the feedback's like. So thanks again. Thanks so much.
all right. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.